In November 2008, Circuit City filed for bankruptcy. It had 567 stores and 34,000 employees. Within 6 months, every single store was gone. No buyer, no rescue, just liquidation sales and empty parking lots. This was once the company that invented the big box electronics store. At its peak in 2000, Circuit City had over $12 billion in annual revenue. It had survived recessions, format wars, and the rise of the internet. And then, in less than a decade, it didn't. This is not a story about a company that was simply outsmarted by the internet. This is a story about a company that made a series of very specific, very avoidable decisions. Decisions that handed its rival a 10-year head start and left itself with no room to recover. The story starts in 1949 in Richmond, Virginia, with a man named Samuel Wurtzel. Wurtzel noticed something nobody in retail had fully acted on yet. Americans were buying televisions, not occasionally, obsessively. Television ownership went from 9% of U.S. homes in 1950 to 65% by 1955. Wurtzel opened a store called Ward's Company, selling televisions and appliances out of Richmond. His insight was simple. The product was complicated, and customers needed someone to explain it. That meant trained salespeople, wide selection, and competitive pricing under one roof. By the 1970s, Ward's had grown into a regional powerhouse across the American Southeast. In 1984, the company rebranded. It became Circuit City. The new name was sharper. The stores were bigger, and the timing was perfect. The consumer electronics industry was exploding. VCRs, car stereos, personal computers. Circuit City went national, and it went fast. By the early 1990s, it had over 300 stores. It was one of the first retailers to sell car audio and installation under one roof. In the early 1990s, Circuit City held a roughly 15% share of the U.S. consumer electronics market. Fortune named it one of the most admired companies in America multiple times through the decade. And then there was appliances. Circuit City sold refrigerators, washing machines, dishwashers. Appliances were high ticket, high margin, and they brought families into the store repeatedly. They were also the anchor that made Circuit City a destination, not just a stop. In 2000, Circuit City made the first of its fatal decisions. It exited the appliance business entirely. The reasoning was margin. Appliances were large, expensive to ship, and difficult to service. Management wanted to focus on higher margin electronics, televisions, computers, phones. On paper, it looked rational. In practice, it handed Best Buy something priceless. Best Buy kept appliances. It captured the customers Circuit City walked away from. Those were families, homeowners, high-value repeat customers. Gone. Meanwhile, Best Buy was redesigning the retail experience from scratch. Best Buy moved to a self-service model, open floor plans, minimal salespeople, warehouse-style shelving. Circuit City stuck with its commission-based sales model, where staff were assigned to product zones. In theory, commissions meant expertise. In practice, customers found it pushy. Best Buy's comparable store sales began outpacing Circuit City's by the early 2000s. Circuit City watched its market share erode through 2002, 2003, 2004. The response from leadership was hesitant, slow, incremental. In 2006, Circuit City's board brought in a new CEO, Philip Schoonover. Schoonover came from Best Buy itself, where he had helped engineer their turnaround. The board believed he could bring the same playbook to Circuit City. Schoonover launched a massive store redesign program called Project Genesis. It was meant to modernize the stores, open up floor plans, and match Best Buy's look. The problem? Project Genesis cost hundreds of millions of dollars Circuit City didn't have. The stores that got renovated performed better, but the rollout was too slow and too expensive, and the competition wasn't standing still. Best Buy was expanding aggressively into new markets. By 2006, Best Buy's annual revenue had crossed $35 billion. Circuit City's revenue that same year was roughly $12 billion. The gap was becoming a canyon. Then came the decision that ended any chance of survival. In March 2007, Circuit City fired 3,400 of its most experienced store employees. Not its worst performers, not its most redundant roles, its highest paid hourly workers. The company said these: workers earned above the market rate for their roles. The logic was pure cost cutting. Replace expensive experience with cheaper labor. What the logic missed? Circuit City's entire value proposition was salespeople who knew the product. The backlash was immediate. The story ran in every major newspaper in the country. Customers noticed. Employee morale collapsed. The brand's reputation never fully recovered. Sales in the quarters that followed told the story clearly. Circuit City reported a net loss of over $200 million in fiscal year 2007. Schoonover resigned in September 2008, just 2 months before the bankruptcy filing. The board brought in James Markham as interim CEO. He had 60 days to find a buyer. He found none. On November 10, 2008, Circuit City filed for Chapter 11. The timing was brutal. The financial crisis had just gutted consumer spending, but Circuit City had been dying long before Lehman Brothers fell. Suppliers began demanding faster payment or cutting off inventory entirely. Circuit City's shelves thinned. Going into the holiday season, the worst possible moment. Customers who walked in found half-empty aisles, and staff who had just watched colleagues get fired. No potential acquirer emerged from due diligence willing to take on the debt load. The company's long-term lease obligations alone ran into the billions. In January 2009, Circuit City announced it would liquidate completely. Liquidators moved in and slapped going out of business signs across every location in America. By March 8, 2009, the last Circuit City store closed its doors. 34,000 people lost their jobs in under 4 months. Now let's name exactly what killed it. First, Circuit City abandoned appliances in 2000, surrendering its most loyal customer base to Best Buy. Second, it fired 3,400 experienced salespeople in 2007 to save on wages, destroying its service advantage. Third, it let Best Buy define the future of electronics retail while it played catch-up a decade too late. Fourth, it loaded itself with lease obligations and renovation debt that made recovery structurally impossible. Fifth, by 2008, the brand had nothing left to stand for. Not price, not service, not selection. There is one more chapter people rarely mention. In 2004, an activist hedge fund approached Circuit City. Highfield's Capital Management built a significant stake and pushed for a sale of the company. Circuit City's board resisted. They believed a turnaround was still possible. In 2007, a private equity consortium led by Waddles Capital also explored an acquisition. It fell apart. The window to sell had opened twice. Both times, the company held on. By the time the bankruptcy came, nobody wanted to buy what was left. There is something instructive in where Circuit City stood in the late 1990s. It was profitable. It had scale. It had brand recognition in every major American market. Jim Collins, writing in Good to Great in 2001, used Circuit City as an example of a great company. The book came out while Circuit City was already making the decisions that would destroy it. In 8 years, a case study in excellence became a case study in collapse. The name Circuit City still exists. It was acquired out of bankruptcy as a brand asset. Various attempts to relaunch it have gone nowhere. The brand is a ghost. Best Buy, the company Circuit City, once matched in size, posted nearly $50 billion in revenue in 2022. Return to November 2008, the bankruptcy filing, the 567 stores, the 34,000 people, none of that was inevitable. Not the filing, not the liquidation, not the disappearance. Circuit City had every advantage. The brand, the locations, the supplier relationships, the loyal customers. It gave them away, one decision at a time. Over the course of nearly a decade, the appliance exit, the commission model that customers hated, the layoffs that gutted morale, the expensive redesign launched too late, the debt that froze every option, and finally, the brand with nothing left to say for itself in a category that was getting more competitive. The most dangerous moment for any market leader is not when a competitor is beating them. It's when they start making decisions based on what they used to be instead of what the market needs now. Circuit City didn't lose to the internet. It didn't lose to a recession. It didn't even really lose to Best Buy. Circuit City lost to itself. And in business, that is always the most expensive way to go.